Welcome back, everybody. This is United versus Everybody. I am your host, Sean, and this is the big one. This is season 2 finale of What If. It's episode 8 in the whole Sire series. Hopefully, you guys have been enjoying this series. I had a lot of fun doing this. It's been 2 seasons. It's gone by super quickly over the last 3 or 4 months or so. Go check out all the other episodes. Again, they're not interconnected or anything, but it is fun to kind of go down this lane. But that's what this whole series is about, right? There are times during a lot of these live streams, times during some of my chats and phone calls with other footy fans, my friends, you guys, fellow co-hosts, you guys seen a couple times. There are times when topics come up or what ifs come up, or just make you stop and wonder, you know what I'm talking about. You guys have probably had it too, like the moments that literally make you stop and wonder what might have been, the what if moments. That's what this series is here to explore. Now, this isn't just me making stuff up like, oh, what if we had signed, such and such, Messi and Ronaldo and everybody at the same time. That's not how this works. A lot of the what ifs could have very gone down a different route. I've showed you quotes. There are facts, news articles, all of it directly from Ferguson, players, all this stuff. A lot of this stuff very easily could have happened, and it is interesting to think of how things could have been differently. So that's what the series is. Today, though, again, the big one. Perhaps the biggest what if ever, probably the one a lot of you have been waiting for, a lot of you have been asking for. What if Rock of Gibraltar wasn't the cause of a falling out between Sir Alex Ferguson and John Magner? What if Magner hadn't sold his shares to a certain American businessman? What if Malcolm Glazer hadn't become owner of Manchester United Football Club? That's what we're exploring today, you guys. So like the video, please. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. Check out the memberships to learn how you can get involved, even in the what if videos as well. You guys know I love doing this for you. Love to get you guys involved. So stick around, get strapped in, put on your fun to wear, get your special sock out. It's going to get good. Let's dive right in, everybody. So before we can imagine a life without Glazers, right? United without the Glazers, we have to do a little bit of refresher on how the Glazers came to own the club in the first place, right? Now, this all started with Malcolm Glazer, and it all started with Rock of Gibraltar. You guys are like, what the F is Rock of Gibraltar? Rock of Gibraltar, for those of you who don't know, he's a racehorse, or he was a racehorse. He was co-owned by Sir Alex and John Magner, one of the club's biggest shareholders at the time. This is John Magner here with Sir Alex. Now, he became one of the most successful racehorses in history, Rock of Gibraltar, winning 7 consecutive Group 1 races between 2001 and 2002. Ferguson believed during this whole time that he had been promised what's called breeding rights, stud rights. And those rights alone could have been worth tens and tens of millions in pounds just in the stud rights to this excellent racehorse. So when Fergie tried to claim a share of the breeding rights, Magner and then his business partner at the time, J.P. McManus, who also held a major stake in Manchester United, they refused. They denied that Ferguson had any claim over this. Ferguson ended up suing Magner, arguing that he was entitled to half of the racehorse's stud fees. Magner countersued, claiming Ferguson had no legal claim to the horse's earnings. This whole thing turned ugly, and even though all parties eventually settled, it really caused a rift. The damage was done, bridge was burned. Ferguson, his relationship with Magner McManus was just irreparable at that point. And it got even uglier because Magner and McManus retaliated. They took it a step further. They started taking a closer look at their ownership in the club. Their stakeholders started looking at the finances, the transfer dealings, and they had a really close look at how agents were being paid. They were really trying to figure out a way to kind of take advantage of this. This put a lot of pressure on United's board at the time, and what it did is it created instability at the higher levels. And when you have instability at the top, when there's these rifts, that creates an opening. A rift is an opening. That creates an opening for someone to swoop in and take advantage of all the chaos and really kind of get their voice into some of the ears of these people involved. In this case, Magner McManus were starting to be a little bit more amenable to selling their shares. They were getting whispers in their ear from somebody. You see where I'm going with this. Magner and McManus sold their 28.7% stake of Manchester United to Malcolm Glazer, who had spent years accumulating more and more shares of the club. the shares from Magner and McManus were the final ones that Malcolm Glazer needed, and it granted him majority ownership and control of the club. He got to 75% ownership. He delisted Manchester United from the stock exchange, meaning it was no longer publicly traded. By June 2005, he had acquired over 98% of the shares in the club, which basically meant a complete takeover. Instead of paying out of pocket, though, Glazer used a leverage buyout, meaning he took out loans secured against United's future revenue. So basically using the club almost as collateral in some way to fund his takeover. This is why we say the Glazers had not spent a penny. They used leverage buyout, put the club up as collateral, basically. What this did was load United with over £500 million in debt, leading to massive annual interest payments and resulting in a lot of protests. The debt is the road to ruin. Many fans were outraged because United had been a debt-free club before the Glazer arrived. And so, again, we talk about the debt. The debt and the subsequent financial model that the club had been put in at that time now really changed everything for us. It led to huge fan protests like you've seen, the formation and the breakaway of a lot of these fans to go form FC United of Manchester. A lot of these supporters were disillusioned. They did not like this at all. This left such a horrible taste in their mouth. FC United Manchester, we know it. We love it. Now, despite the financial controversy, though, United continued to win trophies under Sir Alex. But post-Fergie, the debt burden and the poor management decisions have contributed to a lot. You saddle that onto the debt, a lot of the ownership. Without Ferguson there to kind of be a voice of reason, to kind of be the biggest ego, the biggest personality, the biggest legend in the room alongside David Gill, it all got a little out of hand. So with that history in mind, that little bit of a refresher, we come to today's question, what if Sir Alex and Magner never had a falling out over a racehorse? And what if Malcolm Glazer had never had the chance to swoop in and become owner? What would have happened? Who could have taken over the club instead? Well, enter Lord Jim O'Neill and the Red Knights. Now, the Red Knights were a consortium put together from Jim O'Neill and a lot of other wealthy United fans at the time. In 2010, so 5 years later, after the Glazers took over, the Red Knights, the consortium of wealthy United fans, basically tried to buy the club. So if Malcolm Glazer wasn't there in 2005, 5 years later, these guys might have had a chance to do it. This had a lot to do with a lot of the fan frustration of the Glazers, but you don't just decide 5 years that this is going to happen. This was commonly assumed that if the Glazers never taken over, the fan-led consortium would have stepped forward sooner anyways. They were always going to do this. So the Red Knights, the consortium led by Lord Jim O'Neill, they included a who's who of businessmen, lawyers, hedge fund CEOs. But again, the main guy was Lord Jim O'Neill. He is a Manchester-born economist, former non-executive director of the club itself, massive United fan. He was the heart of the Red Knights. He and the rest of the group, they looked to gather 50 people, each committing £20 million, so a lot of money. And even Must supported them, the Manchester United Supporters Club. They did have the fans' interest at heart, the Red Knights, and that was a big enough. But the problem was it wasn't enough. This is where they started to meet with a certain Qatari Sheikh Jassim Al Thani in an effort to convince him to join the cause. So the Red Knights eventually reached out to Qatar as well. They sought an investment from this Qatari consortium between 500 million and 750 million pounds, which combined with the Red Knights cash pool that they were trying to accumulate was seen as a sum that could get this deal over the line. The alternative proposal at the time was that the Qataris would maybe buy the club outright, but enable the fans to collectively purchase a 25% stake to ensure representation. Again, Red Knights, Qataris at the time, 2010, fan-led, fan-based ownership was a big part of that whole push. The plan even got so far as Sir Alex and Rennie Mullenstein meeting with Sheikh Al Thani in Doha. But ultimately, nothing ever came of it. O'Neill managed to get 17 partners to commit £20 million each, but it wasn't enough. They hired a major investment bank to advise them. A big statement of intent, but it still wasn't enough at the time. Getting so many investors to agree, it became a complicated task. And at the end of the day, in 2010, it didn't work out because Malcolm Glazer didn't want to sell. O'Neill has even said himself on the matter, the only thing that would really work is some imaginative buyer who basically has a better purpose behind owning United and is prepared to pay the Glazers a lot of money. Again, so this was all in 2010, though, 5 years after the Glazer era began. In 2005, it would have been a very different story. And had the investment group acted sooner, had they got that done sooner, they could have very likely been successful. It wouldn't have been basically a hostile takeover, a leverage buyout like Glazer did. If Jim O'Neill and the Red Knights had successfully bought Manchester United, the club would likely have taken a very different path compared to what we've seen under the Glazer era. Here's the changes that we would have seen. First and foremost, no debt. One of the biggest criticisms of the Glazers' ownership was their use of leveraged buyout tactics, which saddled United with over $500 million in debt. Lord Jim O'Neill and the Red Knights, however, had a different approach. They aimed for fan-friendly ownership, meaning United wouldn't have suffered from years of heavy interest payments, which have cost us over $1 billion in total. This could have led to more investments in players rather than worrying about paying off debt. This could have been meant better facilities and stadium improvements over the years. What we've seen, Old Trafford has basically deteriorated, has not been kept up, and that's why we have to build a whole new stadium, and that all happened under the Glazer ownership. Something very different could have happened. Another big change we would have seen, kind of already mentioned this, fan ownership model. The Red Knights were inspired by clubs like Barcelona and Bayern Munich, which have a very significant fan influence. Bundesliga is very well known for its 50+1 model. If the Red Knights had succeeded, they might have introduced fan ownership stake, giving supporters a say in club decisions, something many United fans have demanded for a very long time. Like I said, Must was very, very supportive of the Red Knights, and a big part of that was the fan ownership model. Next change, better transfer strategy than what we've seen over the years, or at least just a transfer strategy. Because under the Glazers, United spent heavily, but they've also spent very, very inefficiently. And it's academic at this point, right? You look at someone like Angel Di Maria, Alexis Sanchez, Paul Pogba's return, Jadon Sancho. With Jim O'Neill, a more sustainable, data-driven approach probably would have been the name of the game, similar to how Bayern Munich operates. And that would have been instituted a lot earlier than the old school mindset. United could have had a stronger long-term squad building strategy and avoided a lot of the knee-jerk signings or the shirt sellers or injury-prone players for that matter. We likely would have seen the rebuild that we're currently attempting under Ineos and Amorim, and that could have been started properly, 20 years ago. It would have been a very, very different thing. Another thing we would have seen is no manager turnaround. We would have seen a little bit more manager stability. The Glazers and the post-Ferguson era have really just been chaotic in every sense of the word. Several managerial changes, inconsistent strategies, inconsistent structure in and around the squad, no plan whatsoever. O'Neill is a self-professed fan of long-term planning. Remember, he's an economist and a successful one at that. He might have pushed for stability, a clear footballing philosophy, a clear identity at the club, similar, again, to how Liverpool really started their rebuild under Jurgen Klopp. I think we would have seen a little bit more stability, a little more patience, and that would have been a better environment for managers and players to thrive as well. We also would have seen an updated Old Trafford, kind of hinted at this a little earlier. Again, under the Glazers, Old Trafford has been neglected with reports of leaks, poor structural infrastructure as well, rat infestations, failing hygiene grading and stuff from the food industry. O'Neill and the Red Knights likely would have prioritized stadium redevelopment much, much earlier, ensuring that United kept pace with rivals like Man City and Spurs in terms of some of the facilities we've seen these clubs come out with. Man City's whole club, in terms of the actual structure, the building, the centers, all of it is top-notch. Spurs' new stadium, top-notch. Old Trafford, crumbling to the ground. We likely would have still had to explore a new stadium at some point. But I think a proper maintenance and a proper upkeep and a focus on that Jim O'Neill and the Red Knights would have done would have maybe pushed that down the road a little bit, not because they didn't want to pay for it, but because it wouldn't have been as vital as soon as it has been under the Glazers. So the big question, though, is that what else would done? we would have kept pace with our rivals after all this. So would United have been more successful without the debt constraints, without the all the other factors we just, the poor strategy, the managerial turnaround, all that stuff? United would have kept pace with clubs like Man City in terms of, spending and development. No, we wouldn't have just spent like we were bankrolled by a state or anything, but I think a clear footballing vision and a strategy and identity that, backed by data, backed by stability, by patience, by long-term planning, would have prevented a lot of this scattergun, knee-jerk, panic buying, deadline day this, and it would have had a transfer strategy that, that would have helped. Unlike the one we've seen that's actually hurt us since Sir Alex and David Gill both left at the same summer. Had Jim O'Neill and the Red Knights taken over, Manchester United would have likely been a more stable, fan-oriented, fan-supported club with a better financial structure, an identity, better stadium, facilities, all that stuff. And we would have been kept pace with our rivals a lot better than we have done. Again, success on the pitch, though, would have still depended on making the right managerial and footballing decisions as well. And I think we would have definitely seen that as well. I think it's hard to predict how that would have looked. Go back and look at some of the other videos if you want to learn how some of the signings could have been differently. But I think the approach that we would have taken, the data-driven stuff, the increase in facilities, would have seen us identify players that are better suited for what we wanted to do at that time. Success is not guaranteed, of course, but we would definitely not be where we are right now, all because Sir Alex and John Magnier couldn't come to a compromise over that damned racehorse. So again, who's to say how on the pitch success would have been, but I think that we would have definitely seen a totally 100% different, night and day different structure of the club in terms of just facilities, transfer strategy, identity moving forward. All of that would have been way ahead of the game and would have not been neglected in so many ways. And so that is what if season 2 finale. What if Malcolm Glazer hadn't have got his leverage buyout in 2005? Who would have come in? Who would have taken over? And how would the whole running of the club itself looked differently had things gone down a different road? Thank you guys for joining me on that one. Like I said, these aren't very long, but they are fun to do. Let me know your thoughts on that in the comments. You guys know I do check those comments out all the time, and I do get back to you guys. Please like the video. Please subscribe to the channel if you are new. Planning is underway for season 3 of What If. If you want to get involved in that, get involved in the memberships. The memberships are your best way to throw out the suggestions. If they're legit, if they look good, I'll add them to the list and we'll work on it. But until then, you guys make sure you like and make sure you're subscribing, and I will see you guys on the next one. Take it easy.